as well as being the first Friday of this last month of the year and the Friday of this first week in Advent, it would also be the memorial of a saint that you probably would never have heard of, but of which I would like to speak just for a few seconds, and I'll tell you why. It's the one referred to as the last doctor, that's teacher, of the East. As you may know, in 1054 there was a split between East and West, but they carried on with the sacraments. They have two priests, they are really priests and they have the sacraments, but there was a split then. But this now is going back to the early centuries, although it's quite far on in the early centuries. He died in around 781 or thereabouts. He was the teacher on icons. There was at the time a big debate, and it was pushed by the emperor. Rome fell, but the East carried on, and there was an empire there, the Eastern Empire, carried on way into the 1400s, 1453 or thereabouts, when eventually the Turks, Muslims, conquered Constantinople. That's way out in present Turkey, Istanbul. So we're now in the period, Rome had fallen, but there was an emperor in the East. He was Leo III, and he was influenced by what? What have we been talking about a lot in the news recently? Which religion?
Islam.
Yeah, Islam. They conquer by what means?
Murder.
Murder, yes, the sword, violence, forcing people. Gentle means of evangelization, convert or else. Well, it was already starting in that period, because they had as the place of operations what was referred to as the caliphate. The caliph would be the big head of the Islamic thing, and they tried to get it again, caliphate. But he was in Damascus. Now, do you know anything about Damascus from the Bible? Do you know anybody linked with Damascus in the Bible, the New Testament? One of the apostles?
Paul.
Yes. What happened? He was...
And Jesus on the way to Damascus.
Exactly. What was he going to do? Do you remember? What was he off to do?
Persecute them.
Exactly. He was going to tell the Christians what to do with themselves, and he meant business. And on the way, do you remember what he was riding? What animal? Some pictures of Paul falling off his horse?
Mule.
Oh no, more a mule, because the poor people, the gentlemen like him, would have a horse. So off came Paul, thrown to the ground, and he heard this voice, "Paul, Paul, why are you persecuting me?" Me was his people. So he was there on the ground, not knowing what to do. He was blinded, and he was told, "Get up, go to Damascus, and it will be shown you what you are to do." So he got up, he was led by the hand, he couldn't see, and eventually Ananias prayed over him, and scales came off his eyes, so to speak, and he was able to see again. Eventually he was baptized, and he spent a quiet time reflecting, and he then was formed by the Lord and by the disciples. They were able to, in some way, complete his education. But the bit I want to mention is this place. It's kind of right now in the middle of history, Syria. It's one of the oldest cities in the world with a continuous history, Damascus. And the house of Ananias is known. Now, this saint, John of Damascus, was defending against the emperor who was influenced by Muslims who do not accept what? Now, do you know one difference between Muslim worship and our worship? What do they not have? Can you think? It's quite simple, really. You go into a mosque, what do you not see? Any idea what you wouldn't see? What you would see straight away in a Catholic church?
Crucifix of Jesus.
Yeah, anything, exactly, anything, any representation. There's no representation of anything beyond. They're not allowed to. But also, even the Jews do not tend to do that, do they? Why? Can you think why the Jews would not tend to reproduce physical objects in their places of worship? There would be the exception of the cherubim. They had the cherubim, remember, over the Ark of the Covenant, a suggestion of presence, but they weren't allowed to make images from the...
Idolatry.
Well, it was God. In those days, if they did so, they would start worshipping them.
Yeah.
And that's what happened with the calf, remember? Golden calf. So, this emperor was actually a Christian emperor in the East, in the 700s, Leo III, was starting to make illegal in Christian churches anything representing the beyond. Even pictures, icons. The word icon comes from the Greek, which means similar to. Icos. Icon is a similar thing. It's a representation of. Now, do you know, however, one difference between the East and the West in the way that the beyond is actually portrayed? Can you think? Have you seen the difference? What have you here, for instance, on these walls? Can you look at the style? What are they? If you compare it with an Eastern icon, do you see the difference? Do you know what I mean by an icon? How they paint icons? Can you see what the difference might be, the style?
Not really, no.
Well, an icon in the East is not allowed to be realistic. It's not allowed to be real. This is real, isn't it? It's kind of, it's as we would, that's actually from a film, The Passion. And these, that's three-dimensional. That is, you've got a statue there. And these represent something close to reality. If you go to the East, what will you find? You'll find the idea of something mysterious. The icon is not quite in the right proportion, or something is not exactly as we would expect it, because they are not allowed, they in the East, to be graphic and realistic as we are. That goes right back, that tradition. It suggests, we say and they suggest, if you see what I mean. We're more direct. But there's also the difference that the icons are in 2 dimensions rather than 3 dimensions. What does that mean? What is 2D and 3D?
You can sort of feel 3D.
Exactly, you can feel it. What's the difference? What does 3D and 2D mean? Dimensions. What are the dimensions in question? Well, 2 dimensions is you've got up and down, haven't you, and that kind of thing. But 3 dimensions, you've got outwards. You see? A statue has outwards as well, physical. Relief, we call it. It's all the dimensions. And by the way, modern science has reproduced 3-dimensional reproductions of the Lord through analysing scientifically what's on the Holy Shroud. Have you seen them? It's actually miraculous, because the Holy Shroud, when put into certain instruments, becomes 3D. It's quite miraculous. It's a power we don't know about. And they're able, therefore, to actually produce something which looked pretty much like our Lord, as it would have looked. Getting away from the blood and so on, cleaning it up, they can calculate what the face of the Lord would be actually in 3D. So anyway, all that to say, this saint was insistent that what's happening is this. When we honour one of these images, e.g. if you kiss a statue or an image of the Lord, what's happening? Are you actually kissing a thing or a person? Because you're expressing your love for the person through kissing the thing. E.g., if you were to lose a parent or a grandparent, and out of instinct you might kiss the photo, just by instinct, spontaneously. You're, as it were, saying, I still love you in the beyond. It's just a sign, that's the closest we can get to that person, touching and showing honour to what we have physically before us. So it's not, and that's the whole point, idolatry. We're not worshipping the thing, but actually honouring the one represented by it. But there is more. Do you know that the Lord also uses these from his side? Can you think of examples? Well, just this fell out by chance now. Indeed. This is an example of the kind of thing that happens now and again. Look carefully here. Now, can you see what's going on there? It looks as if it's just good art. Toss it around if you want. It's actually more. That's Olympia. And it is a statue which has been known to do things. The eyes to move, the head to move position, and so on. It's one of these miraculous statues which the Lord is, as it were, using to show that he's actually engaging directly with his creatures. But there's more. Do you know in your life of any experience that you've had of a statue that's done anything or an image that's done anything? Because you've been around. I wouldn't be surprised if you have come across situations. Do you know of any? Yes?
The statue of Medjugorje at Grace.
Good. That would be an example. A very good example. And there's also actually there, isn't there, the new statue of the resurrection, Christ, isn't something coming out of there?
Risen Christ, it weeps at the knee.
Yeah. Well, around the Catholic world, there are quite a few of these that have been going on over the years. Statues that weep, either tears, and they're analysed, and they're found to be human tears, or what else?
Blood.
Blood.
Blood and water.
All kinds of things, and oil and so on. In fact, I had a case in Italy. Somebody called me because a statue of Padre Pio they had in the house was oozing out of it miraculous oil. Just
The statue of Medjugorje in Bishop's home.
Yeah.
Started to glow.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, here we are. Statues.
6 months ago, it was taken out for examination.
Really? What happened?
I don't know what happened. It was just I don't know what the evidence had, but what the result was. But it just started to glow.
Wow.
In the house.
Well, that's interesting. But anyway, in the East, lots of icons have been doing things over the years. There was an icon on Mount Athos, it's a big monastic settlement. When a monk was singing before it, he couldn't go on, he couldn't remember the melody. Can you guess what happened? The icon started to sing. And it's still honoured as the Our Lady of Melody. And then you've got, in Damascus, and that's where I wanted to land, in recent times, something which has happened. Now, are you sitting comfortably? Then I shall begin. It's not much known, but it is documented. It was, before these troubles started, it was the case of a lady who was very young. She married actually quite young. She wasn't yet 20 when she married, about 18 or so. A good Catholic, well, actually she'd be Catholic, but of Eastern Rite, and a good husband. And she had an icon, and things started to happen in her life, especially around Eastertide. This icon started to do things. Miraculous oil was coming out of it, and moreover, people were bringing their own icons and leaving them with them, and they were trying to have the same thing. They brought them, the oil would come out of them out of nowhere, miraculous oil. But things then were starting to happen to herself. She had the stigmata, that kind of thing, around Good Friday. But then, something was coming through, and the Vatican sat up because it was something concerning the Vatican. It was this. Every 5 years, the East and the West have the same date of what feast? The biggest feast of all.
Christmas?
No! What is the biggest feast of all?
Resurrection.
Yeah! Easter. Christmas is actually in preparation for the big cosmic victory of Easter. So Easter is the big one. But the date in the East and the West isn't the same. The reason is that they kept the old calendar, and we had under Pope Gregory the reform of the calendar because we were losing time. It was going to get out of sync. So we lost about at least 10 days, around about 1500s, around about there. And the result was that since then we've got this different date, except about every 5 years when it coincides. Now, what's been going on is this. This lady, Myrna, she was having these things going on, miracles, and then going into ecstasy and all this. And it was every 5 years or so, when the date coincided between East and West, there was a huge increase of it. And the Lord then was starting to give her to understand, and through her, the Vatican, he wanted this division healed. It was not something to sit down on and be happy about. This division of the date of Easter between East and West, it was a scandal which he hadn't invented, and so it was something that he wanted healed, and Pope Benedict was trying his best to do something about it. He actually did sign some kind of possible way of getting round the problem, making it some kind of agreement between the heads of the East and the West so as to get some kind of acceptation of his position as Patriarch of the West, and in that way to get, as we had for the first 1,000 years, one church. It was theoretic, but he was a brain and he knew what he was doing. But it wasn't taken on, at least as yet, by the East, but it was obviously something that was serious. Rome was bending over backwards. Now, actually, what is interesting is that it came out, I'm not sure whether it's true or not, but there's the case of Vasula, for instance, and I think she, and maybe one or two others, were given to understand, if it's true now, that actually the correct date historically would actually be the Eastern one, because it hadn't changed. So, anyway, maybe that's what Benedict had in mind, you see, because he would know all these things in the air, having been in charge of the Congregation of the Doctrine of Faith, but to examine all these mystics, you see. But all that to say, there's more been going on underground than meets the eye. But, I just want to finish with this. The question of the East and the West and the date is not just human. God is involved. Do you know what actually happens on Easter Day in the East, at the point where the Lord rose? Where did he rise? Which city? Where did he suffer? Where's Calvary? No. He died in Jerusalem, or just outside, didn't he? The holy city of Jerusalem, which is now a very dangerous spot, because the Muslims and the Jews are all there together. So anyway, what happened there is that as soon as they had peace, Constantine was able, he was the first Christian emperor, to build over what had been vandalized basically by the Roman Empire, to stop Christians worshipping there or anything of the sort, also to stop Jewish things going on there, to make a temple of Zeus, I think. Well, there was a prayer made by one of the ones who was working there, one of the actually bishops down there, that once it was completed, the Lord would give a sign on the first Easter. And you know what the sign was? When they finished building the church where the Lord actually rose. Any idea? It was, well, the Lord gave this sign of his own choice. He made the light come out of nowhere. A light which no human being had ignited. And so they started to have this big candle with no human being lighting it, there from that time onwards at Easter being lit by God. Same time, same channel, we would say. It's always the same time each Easter. But what is the date? Well, it's the date that was there then, which didn't change. And so it's gone on and on and on, and it's still going on to this day. It happens only in the hand of one person. It has to be, otherwise it'd be warfare. It's always the direct descendant of the Apostle James, who was the first bishop of Jerusalem. Therefore he's the Greek patriarch, one with a long beard. And in he goes, and it happens at the same time every Holy Saturday. All that to say that when we see these little things happening with icons, and they do happen, and also photographs, you've seen pictures of things, haven't you, or negatives coming out, well, they're all, in a sense, tiny reflections of this big one in which heaven and earth are actually engaging, not with representations, but with power. And that shows how close heaven is to earth. Just think, that's the power that was there at the moment of the resurrection, and which we anticipate slightly at the explosion of Christmas. There's one YouTube, which is an amateur one, which is out there, and it's something which happened to just an ordinary man on pilgrimage one Christmas. He was down there in the grotto of Bethlehem, where the Lord was born, and he happened to have his camera on, his video camera, without knowing it was on, and at a certain point, when he played it back, he saw that for a fraction of a second, just at the grotto where the Lord was born on Christmas, there appeared the form of a child, and disappeared again. So the Lord is using not just icons, but photography and indeed YouTubes to get the message across. He's very much around, and he's present in our midst. So even though at the altar we can't see a thing, it's the same thing and it's more. It's as it were the incarnation. So open the eyes of your faith. You can't see a thing, but there's far more going on than you can possibly imagine, even on this little altar.
It's right here. How about this way up, please? Oh, don't touch them. I don't want